Hey guys, welcome to your review for chapters 22 and 23, which is going to cover the Great Depression, the New Deal, and World War II. And so, as we get rolling, we'll cover these one topic at a time. Now, remember, this isn't going to take the place of what you do for your reading, the completion of your homework assignments, the things that we do in class and discuss in class. These reviews typically give about anywhere from 60 to 70% of the information. It's up to you to be able to interpret that information and then be able to apply it to your to your questions on your test. So let's get rolling with the Great Depression. Something to think about: to what extent did the Great Depression maintain continuity and foster change in American political and economic policies and structures? So let's take a look at it. So if you remember in class, we did a lot of work. We did a worksheet that talked about the main causes of the Depression, and you were to rank the 11. As a matter of fact, I could pull it up here on the screen for you to take a look at. And so you fill out this worksheet, and you have it in your possession to study. And there are a lot of different causes of the Great Depression. You know, the continuity of the rich getting rich and the poor getting poorer, and so that maldistribution of income and wealth is still there. The overexpansion of industrial production and agricultural production. Because Europe laid in ruins in World War II, there was nowhere to trade or nowhere to send these extra items. And so they sat on the shelf. And when they sat on the shelf, they weren't making any money, which led to an overproduction of industry. We were making too many of goods, and we weren't selling any. Automation, where basically machines are going to take the place of human beings and render those human beings obviously unemployed. We have a problem with unregulated banking practices. What happens when people don't pay back their loans and people are relying on the bank to kind of hold on to their money? Well, when the bank runs out of money, those banks are going to shut down. Our tariff policy kicked us because when we raised our tariff, European countries also raised their tariffs. There is no global trade. It ties back into the overexpansion of industrial production, that we're not trading. And when there's no trade, because we're trying to protect our domestic industry, we just need that global trade to be successful. The impact of European and the world economy, we just discussed that. Monopolies were still at large, and we're still hoarding most of the, not allowing small businesses to compete for business. The philosophy and policies of Herbert Hoover, which we'll talk about here in a minute. The overexpansion of credit. Now, the overexpansion of credit, where people are taking out loans, but they're not able to pay back loans, are going to hurt banks. They're going to hurt businesses. They're going to make our economy unstable. And so I believe that the overexpansion of our credit is one of the big reasons why any type of depression or recession happens. It's due to an overexpansion of credit or poor banking practices. And then, of course, the stock market speculation, which, of course, led to the crash. And so keep in mind when you're taking the test these ideas of reasons why the Great Depression happened. All right, so now I'm going to take you back to the PowerPoint here. And talking about the causes of the Great Depression, you can kind of see an overview. Where is this? I'm going to hide that. Where they're going to, a lot of these causes that we just talked about, like the Courtney-McCumber tariff, which is designed to protect American industries, but does not allow global trade. The assumption of debt, buying on installment plans, but not being able to pay back. Same thing when we bought on the margin during the stock market. Remember, we talked about putting 90% down, putting 10% down and borrowing 90% in hope of using the profit to pay off the debt. That's really no way. That's no good economic plan, and that ended up hurting the United States, which led to the crash of 1929. And then, of course, our socioeconomic conditions, where our top 1% actually owned about 35% of our nation's wealth. So while the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poor, and we end up hitting a depression. Stock market crashes in 1920. It's you can pull this up and you can watch the video of the simulation of the crash, but it happens on October 29th, 1929, and this is the beginning of our Great Depression. All right, so for Herbert Hoover, who was president between 1929 and 1933, he believed in what we call rugged individualism. He believed that he saw the role of the government as that of basically kind of like an umpire instead of a player in the economic game. So the government wasn't going to reach out. They had less. They had less political experience than any president since Grant. So in a crisis, Hoover was very unable to appeal to public opinion, and so because of Hoover and his beliefs, he believed that he was highly optimistic and hopeful of the outlook. He said that prosperity is just around the corner. He tried to build business confidence through voluntary action. He persuaded business leaders to keep wages up voluntarily. He asked the Federal Reserve to make it easier for businesses to borrow. The Hawley Smoot Tariff of 1930 was a disaster in that it provided high protection for U.S. businesses. It cut personal corporation income taxes. He establishes the Reconstruction Finance Corporation in 1932, which provided $2 billion worth of loan money to banks and insurance companies to keep them going. He passed the Agricultural Marketing Act in 1929 to keep prices from falling lower, and providing loans to cooperatives, and then tried to pass unemployment relief. He felt relief was a local problem and that the government should not interfere. He believed in letting laissez-faire kind of work itself out. And remember that word, rugged individualism. He was determined to keep a balanced federal budget, and he felt that large federal deficits, that the inflation would frighten the business community. And he did not believe in deficit spending. He believed in maintaining the gold standard and push down prices and increase debts. And so, obviously, this does not work for the United States, and we're going to sink further into the Depression. Anybody that was a Republican, whether it was Coolidge or Hoover or Harding, they're going to believe in letting laissez-faire and corporations to kind of work itself out. He's going to be against deficit spending, like the Democrats did. So just something to think about. All right. You can look at the Depression by numbers here. You can see unemployment grew up to 25%, and like I told you in class, in some cases as high as 85%. And you can take a look at the unemployment rate at its peak at 25%. A lot of people blamed Herbert Hoover. The Great Depression was also a time for migration, as people are going to pack up and they're going to leave, whether it's the farm, to move to California. If you've ever read The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, is the story of a group of Okies that get foreclosed and they head to California to look for work. And often these people would shack up in what we call Hoovervilles, which are shanty towns that were usually located in parks. You don't need to know anything about the bonus march. See, moving on. Oh, and it just so happens this was during the worst time in worst drought in American history. Basically, really a 10-year drought in just to kick kind of dirt in our face, so to speak, as far as the Great Depression, just to kind of pile on. Let's see what else. Here's some pictures of the Dust Bowl. And so in 1932, it was clear that Hoover was not going to get reelected, and this leads to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so just some differences between Hoover. Hoover was seen as kind of pessimistic. He believed that the Depression was caused outside the United States after World War I. He was cautious, always looking backwards, and he identified with industry and finance, whereas Roosevelt was seen as more optimistic. He believed that the Depression was caused within the United States. He believed in experimenting, using his New Deal program to pull us out the Depression, and he was often surrounded by intellectuals and social workers. And if you remember, the Democratic Party is going to reach out to minorities, led by his wife Eleanor Roosevelt, and that's why a lot of minorities are going to identify themselves as Democrats. So Roosevelt will win. He'll win with around 57% of the vote, and wins the election in a landslide, 472 electoral votes to 59. All right. And so this opens up your fifth party system, which is our current Democratic Party. And you can see that we've talked about how they were mainly surrounded with minorities, Catholics, women. The youth are usually all identified as part of the Democratic Party. So just some things regarding the New Deal as we get into it. So let's jump to the New Deal. Remember the New Deal. New Deal. Their three goal was relief, recovery, and reform. Relief is instant. Fixing the problem instantly. Recovery is a little bit more short term, and then reform is long term and also complete change. And so, as we look into our 100 days, and guys, this is where I'm going to actually pull up the answers to the little worksheet that y'all did in where is it? Oh, here it is. The worksheet that y'all did in class, and we kind of went over it. Here are the complete answers if you ever want to take a look at it. And there are some programs that are more important than others that you need to know for the test. As I pull my notes up over here, remember Social Security is going to be a big one on this. The FDIC is another one, but just kind of talking about the New Deal in general, it's very similar to the progressive movement during the early 1900s under Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson and William Howard Taft, and how muckrakers are going to expose the kind of the evils of society, and the government is going to intervene on their behalf. And these progressives were there to kind of challenge kind of Hoover's kind of laissez-faire attitude. Um, they believed in kind of turning the United States into a welfare state, and so in his New Deal philosophy, he believed in agrarianism, which was William Jennings Bryan's tradition of monetary inflation. They believe in economic conservatism, and they had a desire to balance the budget, which is going to be kind of those hard things to do. They were liberals, reinforcing kind of Wilson's tradition of antitrust laws to restore business competition. They believe above and beyond that the government should work to control the industry. And their economic theory was behind the economist John Maynard Keynes and his idea of obligation, that the government needs to increase spending. And that's where we call priming the pump or going into debt. So if you look up here on the sheet or on this worksheet, it talks about priming the pump. Where's my mouse? Where it talks about priming the pump or pouring a little water into a dry pump or spending money in order to get us out. Now, not everything was hunky-dory with the New Deal, and we're going to talk about the opponents of the New Deal, but some of the negative achievements during the New Deal was that it restricted business freedom, so it kind of goes against the laissez-faire kind of attitude. It expanded government bureaucracy and debt. If you don't know what bureaucracy is, it's just that it takes a long time to kind of go through the process of the government. You know, if you apply for a government program, it just takes a long time to work through the process. The New Deal is going to stretch the Constitution. You remember the Supreme Court that was led by Republicans are going to start striking down some of the New Deal programs because they were deemed unconstitutional, and it also controlled farming and labor, which also is going to be deemed unconstitutional. However, some of the positive achievements is that it did speed up and bring about recovery. It did improve conditions of the working class, especially for women and blacks. It did help the middle class protect homes, their farms, and their savings. It did reform the economy, and most above, it did regulate business and industry. So some of the goals that they had, as far as the banking, just general goals. All right, for as far as the banking system, they wanted to restore the U.S. faith in all banks which had failed. And so in 1939, they're going to pass the Glass-Steagall Act. So I'm going to put this down here at the bottom. So under the Glass-Steagall Act, it forced commercial banks to have nothing to do with either financing corporations or selling securities, allowing the separation of commercial and investment banking, so speculation by banks is limited. And it's going to set up the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, to insure deposits up to $2,500 in that. And that's one of the legacies of the New Deal. It's going to help regulate any credit or market instability that's going on in there, and its purpose was to make society and individuals feel more secure about the banking system. And like I said, this is obviously going against laissez-faire because the government is stepping in. All right. For securities, talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission, their goal was to prevent over-speculation. Their goal was to oversee and regulate the issuance of all securities and to overlook the stock market, to set up rules for the stock market operation, to discourage wild speculation and stop the manipulation of stock prices. For the currency, they wanted cheap money and low interest rates. And so one of the ways that they're going to try to control the interest rates is through the, where is it? Oh, it's through the, Well, I've lost my train of thought here. Um, they're gonna try to do it through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Here it is, Reconstruction Finance Corporation, to buy and sell gold on the world market, so the U.S. can take its own hands of the control of the gold value of our dollar. Therefore, the financial capital of the United States was now Washington D.C., not Wall Street. Another example of government intervention, and then they're going to devalue the value of gold, or the gold dollar, eventually. Will abandon the gold standard in 1933. Now, remember, as far as the federal budget is concerned, we're going to use deficit spending and try, instead of trying to balance the budget. That was a goal of the New Deal. All right, some other things: the agricultural, where is it? The Agricultural Adjustment Act. Remember, during the Great Depression. They grew too many crops. And so we had to limit how much crop production was going on. And so for the Agricultural Adjustment Act was intended to raise farmers' purchasing power. The national government gave benefit payments to those who agreed to reduce the production of staple crops like cotton, wheat, hogs, tobacco, and corn. And payments are going to came from a processor tax. It was a higher price for consumers, and it's going to drive prices up. However, this was deemed unconstitutional because the government is basically telling these farmers that they're taking away their freedom to basically grow when they want and how much they want, even though it's advantageous for the farmers to limit their production. And so they're going to share. One thing about the AAA that you need to know for the test is it does share conservative value. And it was eventually replaced by the Civil Conservation Courts, which is right above it, which is going to employ single men for resource jobs such as planting trees, fighting fires, and flood control. So whereas you see the Agricultural Adjustment Act was kind of a complete debacle because the farmers tore up the soil in the Midwest, and when the Dust Bowl happened, it blew up into the air. They're going to try to fix that through building, building, helping build forests, developing dams for flood control, and they are all going to fight for financial reform. All right. Let's see what else when it comes to the New Deal. Of course, make sure you know what Social Security is. So let's find Social Security. There it is. All right. So the Social Security Act, of course, is the big argument with the Social Security. Well, first of all, Social Security is designed. It was created as unemployment insurance. Then it became disability insurance and old age pension and child welfare benefits. All right. And it eventually is going to leave out the farmers and domestic workers and the self-employed. And really, it's going to be turned over just for the elderly, as you know today. But you know what the problem is with today is that we don't know how much is going to be left when we retire. When I retire, when you retire, when your parents retire, how much money is going to be left in Social Security? And the reason why is because the baby boomers who were born right after World War II are becoming of age of retirement. And so the fear is that these baby boomers are going to deplete the Social Security where there's nothing left. And this is one of the criticisms of the New Deal. It does establish a political alliance between the New Deal and organized labor. It doesn't provide unemployment insurance who have lost their jobs. And then eventually, of course, it provides old age pension, and it will help a dependent child and handicapped with pensions up to $20 a month back then. And then, of course, eventually this will get enhanced through Medicare and Medicaid in the 1960s, right? And so I think those are kind of the main things that you need to know as far as the New Deal. Of course, here are all the answers here. So as I scroll up and down, you can always pause and check your answers. Of course, the Wagner Act, which is the right to organize, is always important. Anything that deals with creating jobs, the Civil Works Administration, the Works Progress Administration, Public Works Administrations, all these alphabet. TVA is going to build dams along the Tennessee River Valley, and then of course the Emergency Banking Act, which we're now all aligned according to the National Bank. All right, I'm going to get out of this. So I'm done with that. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, and so I've kind of already covered this. So obviously, if you have any questions, you can always come and talk to me. Prohibition gets repealed because it turns out alcohol does make money. Here are parts of the second New Deal that we've kind of already talked about, and then we did this in class already. Let's see, we're promoting. All right, so let's talk about New Deal opposition because you do need to know kind of the opponents of the New Deal, and mainly it lies in these three guys: Charles Father Coughlin, uh, Senator Huey Long, who believed in the Share the Wealth program, and if you don't know what Share the Wealth means, it basically it's kind of an early part of communism. So let me pull up the things that you need to know for their opponents. All right, so some of the opponents of the New Deal um, are conservative businesses who formed the American Liberty League of 1934, and so I think you're going to see parts of the American Liberty League, some quotes by them in the on your test on Friday. Huey Long, who was a senator and governor from Louisiana, had the Share the Wealth movement, who planned to take great fortunes away from the very wealthy, and every family would receive an income of $2,500 a year and $5,000 for the homestead, which looks a lot like communism. And then there's Dr. Francis Townsend, a California doctor who wanted a $200 a month monthly pension for those over 65 and older to spend within a month to boost the economy, which sounds a whole lot like Social Security. And then Charles Father Coughlin, known as the Radio Priest, he establishes the National Union for Social Justice to appeal to the nativist movement and wanted currency inflation and the government nationalization of banks. And even though the United States had a tradition of radicals and even violence at times, it was a tradition of an individuals, not collective radicalism as in other countries. All right. Another opponent of the New Deal is going to be the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court is going to deem laws like the AAA, the Shetler Poultry Corporation. They're going to deem the NRA unconstitutional, mainly because because the government can't dictate how the government people run their business. And so FDR had the idea, because most of these are obviously Republicans on the Supreme Court. He had the idea of trying to pack the courts by adding 6 more justices, which, oh, by the way, would be Democrats, to help kind of overturn some of this legislation. This does fail. It does not happen. But so the Supreme Court does kind of relinquish some of its power. Not relinquish power, but it allows some of these to they are not going to be as harsh as far as deeming these unconstitutional. A bill was defeated as the Democrats in his own party refused to support it, and public generally opposed this court packing bill. But all he wanted to do was he wanted to add a Supreme Court justice for anyone upon reaching the age of 70, which means 6 would have been added, which didn't fly. But all in all, it was they were an opponent of capitalism, and an opponent of the New Deal program. And I think that's all for the New Deal, I believe. Remember that the New Deal was Remember that the New Deal is going to turn the United States into a welfare state, where the government is going to intervene on behalf of the people. It also creates a strong tradition of the working class in the Democratic Party, as well as women and African Americans. All right, and so here are some other things regarding the Great Depression. Eventually, so the argument is whether or not the New Deal got us out of the Great Depression, and this recession that happens in 1937, 1938 would almost be an argument that it wouldn't have gotten us out of the Great Depression, because unemployment was starting to go back up. But we're going to go to war instead in World War II. Now we've seen parts of this PowerPoint in class over the last couple of days, and so I'm not going to bore you with the details, but mainly, of course, as you would want, what's going to be on the test. I'll add it back to this page. All right. Anyway, all right. So as far as World War II, remember we're talking more about the social aspect of these. Of what's going on in the war, or what's going on at home. So a lot of the stuff, like I said, we've already gone over. FDR really wanted to be a part of this war, even though the Americans wanted to be neutral. So there's the argument of isolation versus intervention. Remember that we were isolated during the 1930s. Remember that we did not join the League of Nations as an example of that. But most people are going to realize as this war happens is that we have to, as a world power, we have to become interventionists. And when we do that, the United States is going to play a more dominant role and in the post-war world with peace, with a peace settlement. And so, as FDR is preparing, basically, that eventually we're going to be involved in this war, people have to realize that they're going to have to support FDR support, basically, of Great Britain. And so you see things like the cash and carry and the destroyer for bases, or the Lend-Lease Act. I might have gotten too far, but you know, all this was to keep Great Britain in the war. And so when Great Britain and the United States signed the Atlantic Charter, they're going to obviously the isolationists are the ones that are going to be opposed to this. But when this happens, it's going to kickstart the United States into this mass mobilization, gearing for war at home. This is where the women are in the factories, and national production is going up, and where factories are becoming more industrialized for creating of weapons. And so we're gonna play a bit more role after the war of that. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the one that's going to put the United States on a path of intervention, and where it expands our role. Obviously, things like the Lend-Lease and the cash and carry policy, they're the things that are going to prove that the United States was preparing to be interventionist, even though at the time they were kind of being seen as neutral. So as we go through this, let's see if I can find the Atlantic Charter on here. The Atlantic Charter is going to promote and secure self-determination and free trade. There was no pursuit of territorial expansion between Great Britain and the United States, and this is going to lay out the blueprint for the United Nations. So, for example, you're going to read parts of the Atlantic Charter tomorrow, and it talks about the freedom of countries to kind of declare their own government. And so this is where the Philippines is going to get their independence. Remember, I said that the United States took the Philippines. They tried to restore order, and it was rejected. But the Filipinos are going to gain their independence in 1946. And this showed political cooperation between Great Britain and the United States going forward. And so, anyway, let's go. All right. So, obviously, Pearl Harbor is going to get us involved in the war. It's a day that will live in infamy. And it kicks us into the war. And I showed you these statistics yesterday. Still, our economy goes from $56 billion in 1933 to $223 billion. Our debt's going to increase, but also our unemployment's going to go way down as a result. And you can see some of the kind of the economic impacts of World War II. We're going to use our mobilization by promoting war bonds to stabilize inflation. People are going to loan the money to the United States for interest. We're going to use the War Productions Board to promote things like victory gardens. We're going to promote the rationing. We're going to promote the collection of recyclable products. We're going to promote not to talk a whole lot about the war, because there are German spies and Japanese spies that lived amongst the people in the United States. We're going to encourage rationing. We're going to encourage car riding. And then we've got women in World War II. Make sure you know Rosie the Riveter, because Rosie the Riveter is going to be on the test. Women were very essential to the war effort. You saw that 350,000 women are going to serve in the military. 37% of women in 1945 are going to be working, going to be in the workforce. And this is another reflection of mobilization. And then also, if you think about it, as women are going to start taking roles in work, they're going to reject kind of that cult of domesticity, Republican motherhood kind of point of view. So you're gonna need to know that for your test tomorrow. Let's see, expansion. All right, so African Americans are also going to 1.2 African Americans are going to serve during World War II. It's still a very segregated military. That'll change after World War II. They're fighting for the Double V campaign. They're fighting for victory against Hitler and victory at home for civil rights. All right, and then the Japanese are going to be placed in internment camps. Make sure you know this is Executive Order 9066, where 100,000 Japanese immigrants are placed into internment camps. This is off of the court case of Schenck versus the United States, where the United States says during war, it is it's basically okay to kind of withhold things like certain freedoms. And for the Japanese, because they were seen as possible spies, they were placed in internment camps. Korematsu versus the United States is a Supreme Court case that rules that internment camps were, in fact, constitutional. And if you're trying to connect it to another time period, you've got to think about how we handled the Native Americans during the Gilded Age. We talked about putting them on reservations. We talked about trying to assimilate them, but basically kind of trying to confine their livelihood. And it's no different with the Japanese during the Gilded Age. And remember, it's off of the court case of Schenck versus the United States during World War I and its Executive Order 9066 promoting internment. Oh, my fault. And then you're gonna see parts of this in Korematsu versus the United States on this, so you can pause it and take a look and read it when you get a chance. Mexicans and natives are also going to have various roles during World War II. Roosevelt will get reelected in 1945, and here is kind of talking about the war. In itself, you're not going to need know a whole lot about war strategies and stuff. And guys, I could spend months and months talking about strategies and war and battles in World War II. How each of these little islands are like little Normandies, taking these beaches, and thousands of men are dying to retake these little islands off in the middle of nowhere that you've probably never heard of. Places like Iwo Jima, which where they raised the flag, Guadalcanal, and the Philippines. But eventually, the Japanese are going to surrender as a result of dropping the 2 atomic weapons in Hiroshima and in Nagasaki. When we criticize Harry Truman for dropping these atomic weapons, we can justify it by saying that Truman probably had more options than dropping these bombs. He could have sent men. He could have sent men on the beaches of Tokyo. He could have strategized bombing around the industrial centers of Japan. He could have. There was the notion that he valued American lives over Japanese lives by dropping these atomic weapons, but remember that Japan had they didn't have surrender necessarily in their vocabulary. And so to him, there was really no other choice. Now, in hindsight, we as historians or students of history, we can look back and we can criticize, he should have done this or should have done that, but we don't know what options were on the table with Truman. And remember, Japan showed no signs of surrendering. And so by dropping the weapon, we're going to save 750,000 American lives. Unfortunately for the Japanese, they're going to lose anywhere from 120,000 to about 155,000 men, women, and children, and eventually those Japanese will surrender on September 2nd, 1945. 70 million deaths, and the legacy. And as we get into the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union are going to stand alone as the most powerful countries in the world. We're going to establish the United Nations, and now these men are going to come home, and they're going to deal with a post-world world where the United States is going to become more of an interventionist, right? And that is the end of our little show right here. So hopefully you've gotten some good information that you can study for the test. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Good luck.